Welcome to another edition of Practical Pet Chat with Lorin and Robert Semro. I hear from folks all the time, like, how did you learn this? How did you know this? How do you know what you know is right? And so I thought it was a great question because my response to them clearly made them question me even more. But I just said, I just talk with people. I read books, I watch videos, I ask others who have, similar pets that I have. And then when I meet an expert, I ask and I listen. And not everything fits my space or what I want to do for my beloved pet. And so I figure out what works for me, how I can take what they're sharing with me and incorporate it in. But at least my fervent opinion is there is no one way to achieve the results
There
we're
is
all trying
not.
to do. Yeah. So I'm going to flip the question on to you and ask you, how'd you learn so much, Lorin?
Well, it's interesting. You used a word that I have issue with.
Okay.
You said you turn to experts. Define expert for me.
That's a great question. That's a really good one. So for me, an expert is someone who has really devoted a lot of time, research, and effort to deeply understand a specific topic. And that's their focus. It's not a casual focus. I never call myself an expert. I call myself a connector of information. Um, I meet a lot of those folks, but there are some deep experts who have devoted their life to specific areas. To me, they're an expert. And I respect that that's what they put their time, energy, and research into.
But if
Doesn't
you
mean I'm
don't,
going to act on it, but I'll at
that
least give them the respect of hearing what they have heard because I don't have that time.
if you don't agree with them, if you hear them out, the tendency of human beings is to, because they disagree with them, think they are not an expert.
Mhm.
And I don't like the word expert because it implies um, the end all, be all, final determinator of information. And for
Interesting.
me, I
Yeah.
like experienced. To me, it's about levels of experience more than expert. And I'm sort of answering your question in a roundabout way, because if I come back around to that, um, people use that word with me and it makes me super uncomfortable, because really what I am is somebody who is super passionate, um, have an affinity for this particular, realm, wellness and nutrition for animals. And that made me dig further than other people might have dug. That made me go down rabbit holes that led to other rabbit holes, and so on and so on. And where a lot of people would have been like, "Oh, I'm good, I know enough."
Sure.
For me, it's I don't ever know enough. And it's like so much in today's world where science says, well, science says that for right now. But the whole point about science is that it's ever evolving and ever shaping and ever changing. And we discover new things all the time. And so, if you look at somebody like Einstein, is he no longer an expert because now people don't agree with him? It is, there have been instances of disagreement in all realms of, oh my gosh, science where people have won Nobel Prizes,
Sure.
and we don't take those away from them. Science has evolved. So I don't like the word expert. I don't think anybody's ever an expert. And if you are, you have simply stopped learning. You need to continue to experience and understand. And I had an interesting conversation with a medical physician the other day. One of the rare, uh, not deeply entrenched medical physicians that was very open to every human being is different,
Yeah.
and what works for this human may not work for that human. And what this human is experiencing, this human may say, I don't have any issue with that. Um, and I so related that to what, you and I have talked about and discovered over time. It's the same thing when people come in and they say, well, raw doesn't work for my dog. There's so many times online where people then will tell those people, you're not doing it right. You don't understand how it works. Where you're just
Right.
not, you just don't get it. And it's like, no, there are dogs that raw doesn't work for whatever reasons,
Right.
and whatever the reasons are, individualistic to that animal. But if it doesn't work, if the human has tried and has, that would be like a medical doctor telling you, well, you're just not doing something right. Listen, dude, I've done this, and this, and I'm telling you that doesn't work for me. And I bring that up because I haven't had a lot of allergies to antibiotics, as you know. And a doctor chose to tell me that this particular antibiotic would have no contraindication for my past history. And so when I broke out in hives 2 days later, I was less than pleased. And when I did a simple Dr. Google search, clearly there was a correlation between the antibiotic that he gave me and the ones that I had been proven to be allergic to in the past. And it's that dismissiveness and lack of respect for people's unique experiences that is really problematic and creates so much divisiveness in the pet food space. It's like, this is it. This is what works. This is the only way. This is how it should be. There is no other way. Well, there are people who have smoked and drank their whole lives, have lived to their 90s and hundreds. And there are people who are athletic and do everything the right way, or that what they believe is the right way their whole lives, and they have a heart attack at 48. So there's so many things that weigh into that. For me, what happened, and you and I've talked about this in the past, is there's the excitement of when the light bulb first comes on for you, of like, oh my gosh, I
Right.
had no idea. That makes so much sense. And, at the time I had a store, and I look back on it and it's cringeworthy for me, because people came in and I was like, oh no, this is the only way to feed. You have to do this. You've got to do it this way. You shouldn't be doing anything else. To do anything less would be damaging,
Right.
and because you're so fervent in your passion and your belief, and you're so green in it. Um, and while you get it, not everybody is in that place. And
Sure.
I think with time and experience of, client after client after client coming in, and you starting to take a step back and realize that's not necessarily the case.
Right.
Not every one of these animals is the same. That sends you back down into research and courses and conversations and looking things up and looking at all the data that's out there. I'm really big on, I want all sides of the data. I
Right.
want, whether I believe in it or not, I want all sides of the data. I want to know what the opinions are. I want to know what the proof is. I want to know, where they extrapolate the information from. And then I can put that together based on what I see. The great thing about, two things happened for me. I had a store that I was very fortunate, very lucky that it was extremely popular. And it was a wellness centric store and for pets. And we built up a very loyal, wonderful clientele that spanned quite some distance, and including even out of the country. Um, and that's a great R&D department. But more than that, I had 12 dogs and a cat. And these dogs were all different. And when you live with animals to that degree, and these were my kids. So they went to work every day. They buckled up in the car. They all had their own seats. If somebody got in the wrong seat, there was a little grumbling. People had to, dogs had to be moved around. And they went to work every day and they came home every night and they knew their routine. And I look back on that and I'm like, I don't even know how I did that. But at the time when people would say, how do you do that? I'm like, oh, it's no big deal, because you're living it, you're doing it. but the great thing was I got to watch them as I fed them, as I interacted with them, as I watched them interact with each other, as I watched, things evolve for them in their behavior, how things translated that they consumed, and realized also things like, gosh, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. People love to over supplement dogs. It's like, well, it
Yeah.
can't be bad. It can't be bad. And I'm like, it can be bad if it's not necessary because people underestimate the power that natural things have, and the strength with which they can affect a being, whether it's food or anything else. I mean, obviously that's very proven over and over and over in food. But I would have to take things out of people's hands and go, no, 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 this is redundant. No, you don't need this. What are we giving this for? Do you
Right.
have something going on for that reason? Why are we giving that? No, don't give that. We don't need that. It's the kitchen, I call it kitchen sinking,
Sure.
where it's like to everything you can give them because I read, I heard, I saw, an advertisement and somebody in this group said, and that kind of thing. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's not how that goes. And if you do too many things, I don't know what's working and what's not working. And, all of those sorts of things. So it's the same thing with food. And the thing is that when you have a passion for this and you're patient and you're willing to go through the exercises of the experiences, you you get to watch and see without being in that fired up hurry. And pet parents are in a hurry. They
Yeah.
want whatever's going on with their kid, they want it fixed right now because that's the modern medicine way. If I want it fixed overnight, I want it fixed right now. No, what you want is to not see the symptoms anymore. And that way you'll think it's fixed. But, that's not how that works. So let's take it a step at a time. I've had employees, and a couple of them well, that were in such a hurry that, like, well, can't I just get to? No, you can't. You don't have a fundamental understanding of this. And if I put you into that, you won't understand the synergy of how all this works together. And I understand that that may not be everybody's thing. I get that,
Right.
but people will come to me all the time and they'll want to argue. Well, this doctor says, this vet says, and
Sure.
I'm like, and I'll be patient and I'll give them the counter information and I always support everything with documentation or links or, things that they can look up on their own and decide for themselves. And then finally I reach a point and I go, listen, you have to decide who you're going to follow and believe. Because until you dedicate some time to following that person's regiment, you will not know whether or not it works. So jumping from this regiment to that regiment to this regiment to that regiment is not going to do anything except keep your kid where he's at.
Right. Well, and I think what you're talking about too is giving the power of influence or authority to someone. So I use the term expert, but you're not an expert until you prove you're an expert to me based on what I've already researched.
Sure.
Because you have to have some basis. I wrote down a couple of things. By the way, first of all, I'm calling dibs because 12 dogs and a cat is certainly a country hit someplace. So I'm going to need to work on a country song from that. But you also mentioned a couple times passion, and so sometimes to me that's why to me that is what the pet world is all about. It is passion, and unfortunately for my experiences, and I think maybe that's how you started. So maybe it is just about experience and what's working and what isn't working. But my experience with the passion part of it is that can also be troublesome. I
Mhm.
see people really rushing towards this trend, that trend, and there's nothing wrong with, hey, let me know about it. Let me see how it might help. But people want to dig in so hardcore. And then there's that other element, and you kind of referenced it, where it's like, it doesn't, every being is different, and every being's environment is different as well.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of, You have to do it this way. And yet I could come up with 15, 20 reasons why there are many people who cannot do it that way.
Mhm.
So if that's the only way you can do it, then what does that mean? And I see a lot of,
You can't
people.
have an animal, is what people will say. Then
Yeah,
you
that's
shouldn't
it.
have an
You
animal.
shouldn't have it. You should, oh, okay. Well, that's nothing pisses me off more than that, because you know what? Every being deserves love, and you just do the best you can and you love them for as long as you can,
Right.
and you're doing better than the alternative for me. And so it's why also too, I don't go all in against so many different things that a lot of passionate people in the pet industry do, because I'll see the efforts. I may not choose that. I certainly wouldn't choose some of the products or services that end up doing some really great things, though,
Hmm.
for the animal world. And so to me, it's one of those of like, hey, that's not for me, but I'm not going to say anybody who's doing that, you know, is wrong, is bad, shouldn't have a pet, shouldn't this, shouldn't that. Hey, it's not for me. It's not how I want to work with my pets.
A lot of people that are impassioned, though, come to it with a predisposed judgmental idea. And and again, that's a problem, because then again, you are expecting everything to be cookie cutter and fit
Right.
in. Back when I started my group 8 years ago, it was early on in the group, and I had a lot of impassioned people that were in the group. And I posted a question. I won't name the brand, but I said, do you think people who feed brand X love their animals less than you do?
Such a good question. That's a mirror question, as I call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was appalled at the answers.
No.
I was appalled. And in fact, I cleaned up my group as a result of it, because the judgmental, visceral responses so took me aback that I actually went in and I said, let me reword this, because I'm not sure that I said this the right way. And I reworded it a different way. And I said, let's say it's just somebody that wants to save a dog,
Hmm.
and let's say it's a dog on the Green Mile,
Yeah.
and they can't afford to do, or they don't have the lifestyle, or they don't have the understanding or the knowledge or the choice, the will to feed, how at that time we in the group were following. Um, do you think they love their animal less? Again, it was they shouldn't be allowed to adopt.
Wow.
So you
Hmm.
would rather have that animal put to sleep than have it live another 2 or 3 years, or however long it's going to have, living on food that you don't deem as appropriate. But this animal would be loved in every way, loved and cared for in every other way.
Yeah.
But you'd rather have the animal. And I cleaned my group up and dropped probably 30 people out of the
Yeah.
group,
Wow.
because I was like, you don't get it. You do not understand that this is nothing more than about, the bigger picture of what people can do. And, ideally we would all have Elon Musk money,
Right.
and be able to do everything we could do for animals. But again, interestingly enough, that would come down to choice and environment and belief systems and that kind of thing, because a lot of times it's not necessarily just about the money. People don't necessarily, they may have a lot of money and they don't see it that way. It's this is what works, this is fine. I live in Texas now, and I'm just saw somebody who had posted something in another group. They're looking to adopt a golden, because their 17-year-old golden, goldens, that's
Right.
like, oh my
That's
gosh,
amazing.
that's amazing for a
Yeah.
golden, right?
Yeah.
Their 17-year-old golden had just unfortunately passed,
Mm.
and they wanted to get another golden for their other two dogs who were missing that dog terribly. And I read through the thread and somebody said, what were you feeding? And it was a kibble.
Right, right. Eh, So
Shocker.
yeah, so and I love that you share that because I was fortunate early on, um, when I was framing how I was going to share knowledge and share experiences. I had a entity reach out to me, and long story short, and paraphrasing, but what they really were was a food bank for dogs and cats, and folks that were struggling to be able to afford to feed their pets. And it came about because the founders were a part of other organizations, and they would see in the human food bank side of things, there were many people who would get the limited amount and would then split that, whatever could be shared with their pets. And so they weren't fully getting the food they needed because that's how much they left. So one, that statement just kills me.
Hmm.
I just really destroys me. But from the standpoint too, I, it was really interesting for me, and I was moved. I actually met this person at an airport because they were flying through town, and he's like, "Hey, can you just come have a drink with me?" And I'd just like to share what we're seeing and what we're experiencing, and it's so profoundly. It's why I don't say against any of the major manufacturers or all the rest of it. That I will say that's not the way I'm going to do it. I'm certainly not going to give that to my pets when I have the ability and the knowledge and the this and that to do better for them. But that doesn't mean that I won't support what these companies are doing because they do make a difference for so many. And but at the end of the meeting, I mean, I literally took the money out of my wallet and was like, "This is all I have on me, but please take this for your organization." And let me make some calls. And I have to tell you, there are a lot of great companies out there. There are some not so great companies out there too, sure. But at the end of the day, what I was asking for was as much sustenance as I could find to help out this endeavor.
Hmm.
And it was companies that I've seen a lot of people go after, a lot of people criticize.
Hmm.
And when they try and prompt me and ping me and say, "You need to, Rob, people want to hear what you have to say," I'm like, "You wouldn't like what I have to say."
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, I care about doing the best for the being. And if that's the best that you can do, then God bless. And I know you love this animal as much as possible. There's no doubt. And so that just really, now there are plenty of people who don't. I mean, we saw in the recent storm system, someone tying a dog to a post, the people that are living out, they release their animals into the wild. I've got a zoo at my house because of something very similar. Hey, someone put this, creature out in a field that it won't last, won't live. Can we bring it home? And I'm like, if we bring it home, we know it's staying with us forever.
Yeah.
So there are certainly folks who should not. I'm not going to say
But
that.
there are people who don't respect people. So I mean, why
Well,
do we
that's true.
expect them to respect other life? I
Yeah.
mean, there are pieces of crap everywhere,
Yeah.
and they just don't respect the sanctity of that being's existence. I, it, I remember one time I was one of those judgmental, bash the brand, type of people, and I evolved into the let's talk about the ingredients, and I concentrated more on ingredients and, let's look at better types of ingredients. Let's look at, some of the way this is put together and not necessarily brand specific. But um, I got a call. It took me 2 years to put this donation program together when I had my store, with manufacturers to be able to donate food regularly to, both the shelter in my town and also a rescue that I worked very closely with. And this particular rescue, the animals that they pick up daily, I mean, they have to have surgery for often because they have to pull rocks out of their stomachs because that's what these animals are eating, rocks.
Right.
because there's nothing to eat. And so I get a call from one of my distributor reps, and he says, "So I have a brand that has a sizable donation." And I said, "Bring it." And he said, "Well, it's sizable enough we'd have to send a truck." I'm like, "Fabulous. When?" He goes, "No, you didn't get to the key point." And it's a brand that I have issue with their principles,
Okay.
and their operating practices more than anything. And it's a long list. And my first instinct was to say expletive no. And I stopped and I said, "Oh man." He goes, "I know." He goes, "But it's a sizable donation." And he says, "And you take care of more than a couple of rescues." He
Yeah.
says, "It's up to you." Because he says, "There's nowhere to hide this. This is going to sit on your floor
Right.
until they pick up." I was like, "Oh man." I was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, bring it." Oh my gosh. Stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks of cases of cans. And I had called all the rescues ahead of time, and I was like, "I need you to get here as soon as you can get here when this gets delivered to get this off on my floor." But I had customers who came in who were regular customers who were like, "What is that doing in your store?" And I just told them straight up. I was like, "Given the choice between eating rocks and
Yeah.
eating this, I
Well,
had to pick this."
yeah. It's so interesting because I remember early on, and I'm sure some of our mutual audience and friends will remember those days when many of us traveled for some influencer type events.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember some of the most staunch people going crazy because I was talking to the top folks at a major company, maybe down Tennessee way, and they were like, "How could you even, spend any time talk to them?" And I was like, first of all, you don't change anything if you never talk either, But here was the funny thing: the reason everybody could see me talk to them was because I was not allowed to go there to their facility. They disinvited me as part of the group that was down there from going and having a tour.
Why? It's such an opportunity to
Well,
talk
and
to
it
you.
was, and that was why the top person, and I do mean the top person, pulled me aside and said, "Hey, that was a mistake, and I apologize. Um, we're all trying to navigate and learn this environment." And I went on to have a really good open dialogue, um, to the point where when they were absorbing other companies by buying them, I'd get a call and a heads up. What do you think? And I'd always say, well, it breaks my heart because I shouldn't say I'd always say that. Many times I would say it breaks my heart because I like that particular, company. And inevitably you're going to have to change what you're doing
Right.
because that's just your structure. I had met their nutrition people. And to your point on, do people love their pets as much? I have never met any of the nutrition people who are looking to do harm or bad. They may have had different philosophies, they may have had different approaches. They
Right.
may have had, in many cases, what I came to learn was I would love to do it that way, but we just don't have the ability to achieve that because either the technology wasn't there or the scalability of that process would have made it, impossible for the scales that they were reaching, which is why I love the smaller companies who were much more nimble and able to sustain that. You were going that way if you knew you were going to pay more, but you believed in that process, you saw the difference, and so you made that buying decision. But you're right, it's really sad because at the end of the day, that is some people's judgment of, well, then they shouldn't. Well, okay, but that answer leads to things that are, in my opinion, much worse. So I will never
Well,
be behind you in those types of things.
those same people, though, if you talk to them about their own diets,
Oh
you
my God.
know,
Yeah.
have you ever just, had had nachos and some beers and said, "Oh, that's dinner. I'm
Yeah.
full."
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody. It's just dumbfounding how impassioned people are when it comes to their animals, who, by the way, are built to eat things that we're really pretty much incapable of eating
Yeah.
and withstand that without issue. You know, I remember the shock when I told you about the Facebook groups that are out there about people in different parts of the country who actually will collect roadkill, fresh
Right.
roadkill,
Yeah.
and that's what they'll feed their animals. And it's shocking when you first hear that, and you're not from those parts of the country. That idea's never hurt, crushed your mind. And I was fascinated by it. I was like, what? And I got into the groups to read it to understand it. Not something I would do. I hope not to be in that position to have to do that. But I get it. If it was an animal that had been freshly hit by a vehicle, truck would pull over, they'd load it up, they'd go home and process it, and that would be food for their dogs for however long.
Right.
And I was like, that's really kind of the full circle of life, because here's an animal that got struck, or and they take steps to ensure the animal hasn't been poisoned and those
Right.
kinds of things, because that was the first thing I thought of. How do you know? And
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and and it really, these are people who do this on the regular, and who am I to say that's the wrong way to do it? It's fresh, it's free range, it's
Yeah, if you didn't know how that end
unprocessed.
result occurred, you'd be
Yeah.
some people would be all for it because,
Yeah.
free range and no,
No
antibiotics anywhere.
processing.
Yeah, a lot
Yeah.
of this is, yeah, no, I mean, and I think that's the dichotomy of, and to your point too, I will go another direction with you. Though there are many people who will stress themselves to such extreme,
Oh,
trying to do right for their pets, their best friends. I call myself a pet parent, and I'll sit there, I'll be like, just universally, holistically, everything that you're doing impacts the environment, the energy, the end results,
including
and
your stress.
including your stress. Yeah, and because that's what our animals feed off of, sometimes more than anything else.
Right.
And so here you are stressing out, and you and I have had it, and I will maybe save it because I know we're limited on time here, but there is no perfect, you're not serving a perfect meal every time.
You
That's
can't.
just not possible. Exactly. It's just not possible.
Okay, now,
Yet these
now that I've said
people,
that, I can remember seeing that in the group once, where I said something like, it's impossible to get it 100% right 100% of the time.
yeah,
And somebody took me to task, and I was like, okay.
well, they're
But
off my Christmas card list.
well, I was going to say, all right, I should reword that. It's impossible for me. I was going to say a
For
normal human, but
most,
I'm not
sure.
normal. It's impossible for me to 100% get it right. I am not 100% on all the time. There is just some nights that it's like you're not getting your supplements. It's not that big a deal.
Right,
You can take a break. It just, because I look at that and I think I don't eat that way either,
right.
and I'm still thriving.
Yeah.
So,
And having grace, sometimes, the best day for your dog, your cat, my lizard, all the rest of that, is just being with you.
yeah,
That's it. It's not, I want to be with you, but I want the best meal. I've got to have an exact, walk of this amount,
right.
this many times a day. Like, just let yourself, breathe, exhale, relax. That's what they're doing, but
Yeah.
they are so in tune with us that if you're stressing and you're, this flutterfly, creation of, chaos, that they're internalizing that.
Oh my
And
gosh, the number of times I've had to tell people, "Oh, just take a breath.
yeah,
It's just food.
yeah,
It's okay. It's just, it's just not that big of a deal." It is a big deal in the grand scheme of things,
right.
but to have a one-off here or there, or just not, just don't stress over it. You
Right.
know, it took my husband years for him to relax, and I'd say it's just not that it doesn't have to be an exact, don't measure it. And I would have people say, what, do I measure it? I hate the back of packages of food. I realize that they have to have a guideline. I realize
Yeah.
it's APCO required and packaging required. But if you ever look at the guidelines on packaging, it's a under 30 pounds is
Right.
from this much to this much. And it's like, holy cow. You
Right.
know, we haven't taken into account age, any issues, wellness, the varying size,
The lifestyle.
the calorie burning,
Yeah.
it's just it's so goes on and on. And people, I could, it was the hardest thing I had to do in my store was break people of that. And I would say to them, do you look at the back of a package on how much you should eat? Well, no, but you know how much you should eat, right?
Right.
Same thing. If you feed a little too much, start feeding a little too less. If you gained a couple pounds, you'd eat a little less,
Right.
and it's the same thing. If you feed red meat, feed a little less than if you feed white meat, or fish, feed a little more. I mean, it just, and that again depends on the animal too. But it's just, they want to make it into such, it's not they want to make it into that. There is so much out there that puts pressure on them
Yeah.
to do it a certain way in order to do it right. That word
Well, and
right.
what's interesting to me, and I know we only got a little bit of time here left, but it's interesting to me. I was having this discussion with some family members, and I said, "There's a lot of great things about technology and social media and all that, and it's amazing what we all can do now." But the amount of stress, and so when we're talking about that too, I'm sitting there going, yeah, I don't remember a lot of friends, family, etc., having those worries. And I had friends and family all throughout the US. All of them had animals. All of them loved their animals as much as you could love an animal. And there just wasn't, they were proud. I had some show dogs in the family. There were certainly levels of effort that were all different. But I don't remember that negative connotation or the stress to be perfect, or I'm doing something that nobody else is doing. I'm this, I'm that. It was just like, you know, it was just more like, what an amazing dog. You're doing great with them. Wow. What kind of breed is that? It's like, what are you feeding? It wasn't, how are you doing that? Are you hand sliced? Is this, cage
Hmm.
free, not cage free? Is this
Hmm.
all organic, not organic, semi organic? Yeah, you didn't worry about that stuff. You were just like, I love this being. I love what you're doing for that being. Amazing.
In
And I think,
fairness,
yeah,
but in fairness, our food and water and soil, chain has completely decimated from what it was. So it also wasn't the focus then that it is now.
sure, sure.
But in my house, I think back and I'm like, I'm like, oh God. I think back and my mom just scraped our plates. And if we had potatoes and meat and, whatever was on our plate, that's what the dogs got.
Sure.
And, now it's like potatoes and pasta and rice. Oh my, I don't really, that's not something I would give to my dogs. But if other people are giving it in a whole food type thing, occasionally it's not the end of the world. If it's a staple, it's problematic because it's problematic even for humans. It just is, the pressure doesn't need to be there. And the problem is that there's no definition of perfect.
Right. Well, it's kind of like, so, and I say this to my kids all the time. That one word that I really get frustrated by is, that's not fair. Fair. And I'm like, fair would imply all things are equal and then someone tips the scale. That doesn't exist in most things in life. Perfect, depending on your definition of perfect, I think Bella is perfect, but I have yet to see her walk across the pool water and not get her little feet wet. Then she'll be perfect, I guess, by some standards. she's perfect to me. And I think that's just that other part, is like that acceptance and willingness to go, I'm doing my best. And what's more important, being stressed out all the time or enjoying as much time? We're all limited, not just our pets, us
Mhm.
too. And this constant stress and judgment and all the rest of it, even if you get the longevity, and by the way, I will say, I have seen it all different ways
Mhm.
by all different people. Some of the people who were the experts have had results counter to what you and I have. So many wonderful people that we get the chance to talk to. And what they were saying 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago is
A
not
year
what,
ago.
yeah, is not what they're saying now.
Right.
It doesn't mean they were evil, they were wrong, they were misleading. It was what they knew, what they were experiencing, and they were sharing that, because the one great thing about the pet world is we can all share in the love of these beings. And part of the way we do that is by sharing what's working, what's not. Hey, how does
Do you
this work?
remember do you remember my heart dog Coco?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So Coco, who I thought was perfection personified, was also knock-kneed, pigeon-toed, hunchback, had double heart murmurs
Mm,
and DC non-nutrition related DCM.
okay.
And
We have to point that out, though,
mm,
right?
it's
Another
ridiculous.
conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
another conversation, but lived to over 18. And I knew everything there was about her, but my goal was to make every day of her life as happy as it could be for her,
Yeah.
and not focus on the things that she had going on because she didn't know it.
Right. Right.
That's the beauty of them. They don't know it. And so if we don't have a crystal ball for any of this. So, I want to maximize every minute I can and bring as much joy and happiness to my animals as possible. And I work at it, but I don't, and I'm impassioned about it. But I think where I draw the line is being obsessed over it, where if I don't have, the right number of grains of their, supplement in, then it's not going to be effective, or,
Right.
those kinds of things. And I spend most of my time telling people to relax. It's okay. Take a breath. It's
Yeah.
okay. Don't stress over this. It's all right. You need to take a step back, get control. The number of people that have reached out on their way to the emergency rooms and things like that. And I'm like, okay, take a breath because your animal's feeding off of you.
Yes.
You need to stay calm and you need to be there for them, because if you're calm, then they're going to calm down and it's going to be easier for them to deal with what they're dealing with. But it's also on the other flip side of that coin is, isn't it wonderful to see how adored animals are today?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the other element of it is they're recognized as such an important part
Hmm.
of our overall health and well-being.
Yeah.
And that shift has been gradual, but has really exponentially blown up in the last few years, I think.
Yes, I
And
agree.
that is one of the great things about social media. And you and I have talked, and there are times where, you know, I'm at a client's, meeting and this and that, and I'm just feeling stress and all that. I can flip on a video of my dog. I can watch a video of somebody else's, dog or cat or bird or whatever's posted, and it changes my entire mood
Hmm.
and then my energy and my day. So yeah, you're that's what's so important. How many times do our dogs, while we're in the chaos and getting things done, and they just come up and put their head on your lap,
Hmm.
and you look down and they're just saying, "It's okay.
Yeah, it's their version of
You are
take a
loved.
breath.
Yeah,
Take a
you are
breath,
loved.
mom. Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. We're gonna get through this." And no, I love that. And you're right. It's not something to be knocked either, but it is one of those of balance. Everything's about balance.
Hmm.
And sadly, it's so hard to achieve.
Yeah.
And, if there was a perfect way to do it, I know we would all be trying to do it. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
But
good.
there isn't. So don't try. Nobody tries for perfect. That's the whole gist of this. There's no perfection. Don't shoot for it.
Shoot for doing better. Shoot for
Yes.
doing better.
Yeah.
That's you can achieve that every day. So the content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.